We live our lives based on a number of assumptions in this highly connected and at the same time highly disconnected, extremely complex and increasingly turbulent world where there are only two certainties: death and even more uncertainty, with change the only constant. And yet, we have professionals like physicians, priests, and financial advisors who claim to offer certainty. I call them certainty merchants. As a financial advisor, my clients expect me to offer them certainty when it comes to their financial life, even though the economy is a complex adaptive system and the financial markets track millions of statistics and the government produces data on tens of thousands of economic indicators each year. The march of technology and democratization of knowledge has not made our life any easier. The way we deal with the turbulence in the current environment is very critical for both individuals and institutions. So you might wonder, how do these certainty merchants do it? How can I find some semblance of certainty in my own life? First, we must admit that there is no single right answer. We simply cannot predict the future with the certainty that our clients would like. The secret of this certainty merchant is, in fact, not certainty. It is better planning. You see, traditional planning is based on the assumption that there is one best idea, but one best answer to any strategic question. And that the world of tomorrow is going to be very much like the world of today. But quite often that's not the case. It's akin to driving looking in the rearview mirror. Most strategic planning is done to relieve management anxiety. Most of them don't even work when you need them the most. As that great boxer, philosopher Mike Tyson stated, everyone has a plan till they get punched in the mouth. That is why I use something called scenario-based planning. Scenarios are stories about how the future might turn out, stories that help us to understand and adapt to the changing facets of the current environment. If you can imagine different futures, you can imagine how you're likely to act or react in those futures, what decisions you might make, and how those decisions might play out. Think of it like a simulation exercise. Surgeons, athletes, and even those in the military, increasingly these days, practice and learn on real-time, interactive simulators too. So scenarios could be categorized as vehicles to rehearse the future and learn so that you make better decisions. It's all about imagining what if, not what is. So there are some fabulous cases of scenario-based planning in action in the business world. Perhaps the most famous one is that of the Royal Dutch Shell, the giant oil and gas company. Back in 1973, the Arab oil-producing nations had imposed an embargo on the West, as a result of which the price of crude oil quadrupled. But Shell saw this coming. Why? Because it was one of the many scenarios that they had already explored. As a result, they were able to deal with the oil shock to some extent, and from being one of the weakest among the 7 largest global oil-producing companies, it became one of the strongest. Yet another example of scenario-based planning in action is that of the New York Board of Trade, which is currently a division of the Intercontinental Exchange, or ICE. Following the 1993 attacks on the World Trade Center, the New York Board of Trade decided to engage in scenario-based planning and decided to set up an alternate trading site in Queens, New York. They didn't exactly predict 9/11, but as a result of the foresight that they had, they were able to continue their operations after the attacks of 9/11. There are some individuals as well as some firms like JDS Uniphase as well as AutoNation that came out with reports after the great financial crisis and credited the scenario-based planning they had done to the speed and profitable manner with which they responded to the crisis. Most major corporations say they engage in scenario-based planning. But if that were the case, why is it that we saw so many individuals and major corporations totally blindsided by the great financial crisis? Why didn't they see this coming? So in my doctoral research, I came up with 3 responses. 1, ignored warnings. 2, blind confidence in probability. And 3, reactive response to change. Let me explain. Ignored warnings. Prior to the great financial crisis, some employees had alerted management about the impending changes, about the problems they foresaw. They dared speak truth to power, but they were ignored or discounted. And what's worse, in some cases, they were fired or disciplined or demoted or silenced in some other ways. For us to improve, we have to listen and make changes, even when it is uncomfortable and especially when we don't like it. Second, blind confidence in probability. We humans have blind confidence in probability, which is one of the main reasons why probability-based scenario planning fails most of the time. You see, when a leader asks for a forecast, he is not looking for anything but the highest probability outcome. When provided the highest probability outcome, our brain has a tendency to latch onto it like a heat-seeking missile. So even if we provide multiple scenarios, the tendency is to go for the most likely scenario for the illusion of certainty it offers. So it's very important to understand what I started with. There is no certainty beyond the fact of death and uncertainty. So it is very important to make sure that we refuse to fall victim to the seductive siren song of probability-based thinking and instead work hard on cultivating equally plausible scenarios in the hope of being approximately right rather than precisely wrong. And number 3, reactive response to change. See, we humans are generally very reactive to change, and so are the leaders. They don't want to change unless they have to, not because they want to. And as Andy Grove, the former CEO of Intel Corporation, stated quite succinctly, when it comes to change, we managers loathe change, especially it involves us. Most leaders are too often too busy firefighting to think about fire prevention or future growth. Firefighters get promoted. Fire preventers get seldom noticed. I must remind you here that Noah built his ark before the rains began. So change is part of our life. We cannot plan for all eventualities, but we can avoid a lot of unpleasant surprises if we use scenario-based planning to engage in mental rehearsal about the 3 or 4 events that are likely to turn your world upside down. Believe me, rehearsals make life less scary. But life is not a dress rehearsal. We only live once. So if you feel you're living a life of indentured servitude, go do something about it. Engage in future-proofing your career using scenario-based planning. So when you decide to buy a house, for example, you are thinking about, do I want to buy a house with a fixed mortgage or a variable rate mortgage? And that question depends upon the future direction of interest rates. So you might ask the question, is there a scenario in which the rates could go much lower in the next 5 to 10 years? The value of that scenario is you are engaging in exercise of looking into the future and looking at the factors that could affect the future interest rates and hence make an informed decision. Uncertainty is never an ally of confidence, and confidence is critical for any commitment. So, to think clearly, feel confident, and act decisively, scenario-based planning could be the key. It is up to us to use it wisely, not out of a sense of weakness or fear, but out of the strength and conviction that comes from knowing that we are prepared to play the hand that is dealt. Thank you.